Hey everyone, it's Allie, and today I want to go over a build concept for the build I am looking to play as my starter in 0.2. Today we're going to be specifically discussing a accuracy stacking crit bleed Amazon. Now, this is a build archetype I would have literally never considered myself actually playing, given that in PoE 1, bleed has a pretty bad reputation. It's never really been meta and it's had quite a lot of problems. And in PoE 2, unfortunately, all those problems kind of ended up porting themselves over, where melee feels pretty bad, bleed does basically no damage, and you're literally better off scaling the hit damage of your build than to actually scale the bleeds themselves. All that is changing in 0.2, given that we are getting a Herald of Blood, which is literally just old gladiator explosions, and we have a little bit of B-roll of it so we can see exactly what it looks like. We are getting ourselves a lot of new passive points on the tree that are going to deal with bleed, and we might potentially even get something like Crimson Dance. And Amazon herself just looks to be an amazing platform for bleeds, and given I kind of do expect bleed damage overall to get buffed up by a little bit, we have quite a lot of things going for bleed to where I really think like it has a pretty good chance of succeeding. Now, the thing about this is that the build platform that I'm putting together on Amazon is so general that we can very easily swap from playing a bleed or physical build to an elemental build by simply just respecking out the bleed nodes and just picking up elemental nodes on the tree, and well, that's it. Most elemental skills in the game have a built-in physical to elemental conversion inside of them, and well, every elemental build is literally just played with you getting as much flat fizz on your weapon as possible, which is what we'd want to do for a bleed build anyways. So with all this, I am pretty excited about bleeds, and I want to show you everything I've come up with and show you exactly where all this excitement is coming from. So the first thing that we need to discuss is going to specifically be Amazon herself. Amazon is a jack of all trades that just gives you so much generic damage that you could really play whatever you want on it. The main attraction here is going to be Critical Strike and Penetrate, to where Critical Strike is a completely new node that allows you to exceed your accuracy rating, giving you extra crit chance for doing so. If we were to plot the accuracy formula into a graphing calculator, we can see that there's an asymptote at 150, meaning that the most accuracy we'll ever be able to get is 150%. With this, we can then extrapolate that it's going to give you flat crits, and if you were to theoretically have an infinite amount of accuracy rating, you would then get 12.5 flat crits from this node. That is a pretty large amount of flat crit, allowing you to hit 20% base crit pretty easily by just grabbing yourself a somewhat decent crit spear. And well, with this and just a single critical strike node on our tree, we can get to 54% crit chance for free. If we were to potentially do something like pick up Stuck Through, Heart Stopping, and maybe even go all the way up to Resonance and pick up all the crit nodes over here, well, just like that, with 3 crit nodes, we are sitting at 75% crit chance with very minimal investment into crits. Realistically, going over here is probably a little bit too far, so just with 2 crit nodes just like this, we are sitting at 64% crit chance, which is a lot of base crit. With this, you can really do whatever you want with, and given that bleed builds right now just want to make the biggest possible hits, crit is actually basically the best way to scale all ailment builds in the game. The other really nice thing about this, because we have to stack so much accuracy to get this crit chance, is we're then going to pretty massively benefit from things such as Falcon Dive, giving us, in this case, 2.7 attacks per second. And because we're going to be stacking a hefty amount of dex, as that's the best way to get a lot of free accuracy rating, we also get ourselves quite a lot of attack speed from something like Falcon Technique. Overall, in this build, we have 6.5 APS for basically no extra efforts, with about 10 or so div worth of gear. All the gear I'm using here is not necessarily day 1 gear, as to me, when I plan a build, I like to see what it looks like with some decent gear on it to see if it actually is worth playing. And I would say pretty much everything we have realistically isn't that extreme, that special. So yeah, 50,000 accuracy looks pretty good given we have so much free attack speed. Now, the thing about that attack speed is it's not very relevant for bleed builds, given you just really want to attack once and do a really big hit. By bleed slams has typically been pretty good in PoE 1. But given we have a fairly decent chance that we might be getting Crimson Dance from PoE 1 ported over to PoE 2, well, we might actually care about attack speed in that case. And given some of the spear skills that we have to work with, we actually might want to scale attack speed as a way to generate bigger bleeds, which we'll discuss later in the video. The other really important thing about Huntress is going to specifically be Penetrate. Penetrate is going to give you 25% of the accuracy on your weapon as added fizz onto itself. If we want to look at a spear that looks something like this, we have 127 base PDPS, and well, if we were to take 25% of the accuracy that this spear has, this spear suddenly becomes a 250 PDPS weapon. That is honestly kind of insane, given that if you just simply remove the crit chance and the attack speed off of this is something that you could realistically find in Act 4 when you would get your second point, meaning you could have a 200 PDPS weapon from the get-go, basically making the rest of the leveling experience a complete joke. A 200 PDPS one-handed weapon is more than enough to get you to yellow and if not red maps fairly comfortably. And then once you do get to endgame and grab yourself a better weapon, if you get just even a remotely half-decent fizz roll on a weapon, you can then pretty easily make yourself a 500 or so PDPS weapon, which in patch 0.1 1 would have easily been worth hundreds of divs, no matter the base type on a one-hander. Your point I'm trying to make here is that Penetrate is absurdly good at giving you just a lot of free flat fizz, basically giving you a weapon that is well above what you should be able to afford at all points in the game, just making scaling anything you want to that much easier. Now, with all this, we have a really good package put together of a lot of free crit chance, a lot of free attack speed, and just a lot of flat fizz, which is the cornerstone of basically any good physical / elemental build. What we also have to look at here is also going to be the skills themselves that we have to work with. Huntress is going to get some pretty interesting bleed skills that we play with that honestly just look really, really good on paper. First, we have Rake, which I really like because it is just like Ice Strike for quarterstaffs, where every time you use it, you do a little dash to the target, meaning by itself, we are going to have some pretty feels good clearing. Out of everything we've seen, Rake does look like the single best clear skill, and I think we're going to honestly have a pretty good time with it. Outside of this, we're also going to get ourselves Blood Hunt. What this is going to do is it's going to look at how much life loss an enemy has had, which we can see up here as this darker red bar. And then when you dash the enemy and hit it, you're going to do a really big AoE that, while we don't know the tooltip of, I'm hoping that the damage of this is going to scale based off of how much life loss actually happened. If that is the case, then what we could do is we can just bleed an enemy, do a lot of damage to it, and then simply use this as a single target nuke at the end of a boss's health pool to, well, just basically instantaneously kill it. Finally, which GG discussed as a really good way of applying really large bleeds, we have Rapid Assault. Now, for Rapid Assault, we actually do have the tooltip of this. Unfortunately, it is incorrect because it's meant to leave a spear on the enemy, and that is on the tooltip. But the point is that the third hit does a stupid amount of damage, allowing us to potentially generate some pretty big bleeds, which would actually benefit from attack speed scaling, given that you would want to be able to trigger the third bleed as fast as possible. The last thing that looks very, very promising from all the spear skills that they showed us is specifically Whirling Slash. What this does is it just generates a tornado on the ground, and if you attack inside of it again, you make it bigger and bigger and bigger, and when you walk out of it, it does a big hit all at once based on the stages of it. We have the full tooltip of this, which seems to be accurate. And the tooltip itself, it says it does 150% more damage per stage. This is where we would really care about the attack speed scaling that we have in the build, because, well, the more attack speed we have, the faster we get to stage 4, and then we just simply walk out of it, and then boom, big bleed application onto a boss. For clearing, this most likely is not going to be relevant because it's going to feel really annoying to play. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be playing as something like Rake for clear, and then Whirling Slash for bosses, where it should feel pretty smooth. What we could possibly do to add on to this to make it feel, well, even better, is to specifically use Disengage with it. Disengage is a skill that allows you to just dash back from an enemy, which would fit in perfectly with this, given we'd want to walk in, do a bunch of Whirling Slashes, and then simply we could just use Disengage to get out to immediately explode it, and given we have a lot of attack speed, that's also going to feel really snappy and feel pretty comfy. I'm honestly pretty happy with just those skills on their own, and they feel pretty good. We have all the skills here, and if we were to look through all the Huntress B-roll, we have seen exactly what every single skill in here looks like, with the exception of literally just Glacial Lance, and I am pretty happy with the skills that we potentially have to work with. We also don't know what Bloodhound's mark does, but there's no way this is not a bleed-related mark, so we might be able to get something like Bleed Magnitude on an enemy that has this on it, meaning we get even more single target damage. And we also have something like Wind Serpents, which we unfortunately only saw a very, very tiny amount of B-roll of it, but it looks like a big hit that consumes your frenzy charges, and if that ends up being a fizz hit, that might also be a really good way of applying really, really massive bleeds onto a target. So we'll have to see exactly what comes of that. But overall, with the skills that we have and all the mechanics that we've seen of them and everything GD has discussed, but I'm pretty sure some sort of Rake, Blood Hunt, and then either Whirling Slash or Rapid Assault setup should probably give you a pretty good clear skill and a pretty good single target skill, completely taking care of both aspects of what a build might need. On top of this, we also have Herald of Blood itself. We don't have the tooltip of it. They literally have not mentioned it a singular time in anything except for an interview that John did after the announcement video came out. But from the little bit of B-roll that we have of it here, these enemies are currently bled, and this is a bleed build, and they're about to go and kill it, and you'll see a bunch of bleed explosions. It honestly looks pretty good. As you can see here, we kill these, and then boom, boom, and then we should get another one here in a second. Boom and boom. And well, if this does any relevant amount of damage, then that's going to kind of take care of any clear issues that this build might have. One final thing to mention, which I know people are going to ask about, so I'd like to add on to the end of this video, is going to specifically be discussing Hemocrystals. Now, unfortunately, we've done the math on Hemocrystals, and it just unfortunately sucks. For clear, it might be okay if we end up playing it with a 2-button setup where we play something like Whirling Slash and Disengage or something like that. But for single target damage, it literally doesn't do anything. When you do the math on exactly how Hemocrystals works, you have a 17% chance per individual Hemocrystal that it will actually hit the enemy that you're trying to hit with it. The thing about AoE scaling on this is because the radius in which the crystals can spawn in and the crystals themselves both scale together. If you were to get a billion increased AoE, the Hemocrystals will be big, but they'd also be extremely spread out, meaning that you'd still have the same 17% hit chance that you'd do baseline. If you were to get negative 1 billion AoE, it'd be the same thing to where they'd be extremely tiny and you'd still only have a very, very small chance of hitting. With a lot of negative AoE, it's actually a little bit better because at that point, the boss's hitbox is so large that you're kind of guaranteed to hit, but getting that much reduced AoE just isn't very realistic with Conk Effect being the only thing that we have to work with. So overall, Hemocrystal just most likely is not going to be added into the build, but the skills that we have to work with for Huntress just look really good on paper, and all the crit chance and attack damage and attack speed that we have, along with everything else, just honestly looks to come together in a pretty solid package. The last thing we need to discuss are going to be defensive layers. While sure, we're not going to be an Archmage where we basically become immortal because we have infinite health, we are going to get access to probably what is one of the single best defensive layers in the game. And if things shape out in our direction, we might even be able to get a secondary defensive layer, which is only going to just make everything that much better. In our build, we are most likely going to want to take Stalking Panthers. This is going to give us a stupid amount of evasion from our gloves, our boots, and our helmets, while at the same time reducing the evasion we get from our chest plate. If you know exactly where I'm going with this, you might have already guessed what I'm going to say, but well, this immediately fits in with what a Queen of the Forest would want, and well, we could just simply stack a stupid amount of evasion, get to 95% evade chance for basically free without too much hassle, and then just run Queen of the Forest, get a very large amount of movement speed for free, and just be able to live off of the evasion alone. While this isn't going to be a fix-all for everything, it should feel pretty good on its own, and it should make you be able to map very comfortably. One thing to mention is we do have a Lickicide in this build concept to put us at 50,000 accuracy rating, but as we saw, this might be a complete overkill, and what we could possibly do instead is just accept that we're going to lose a little bit of attack speed. In this case, we lose 1.4 APS, and instead just put on a high evasion and high life shield instead, giving us an extra 25% movement speed with a Queen of the Forest and putting us up to about 2.6k life with the modest gear that we have in here. I really don't know exactly how we're going to go about this, but honestly, I feel like that is going to feel pretty good. And what we could possibly do as an addition in the mid game, if that's not enough defensive layers, is we could unironically consider going block. There are quite a lot of really good block nodes throughout the tree. Deflection is pretty good. Flashy deflection is also pretty strong. Lay Siege is amazing, where it's 1% free damage per 1% chance to block. And at the same time, we might see a few other changes to some of the block nodes around the tree and maybe potentially get even more added on here. But the point is, we should get a pretty high block chance just for existing and give it a pretty massively buffed block in 0.1, where they made it so now just always works in all directions instead of you having to specifically raise your shield and go through any sort of nuance with it. Block overall feels really good, and well, evasion and block together are really, really solid defensive layers. With that, we'll have a stupid amount of movement speed from Queen of the Forest, we'll have a really good defensive layer, and we should have quite a lot of free built-in scaling, giving us pretty much everything we need in a build to really have a successful time. That's all I really have to say on this build concept. I am pretty happy with it, and I feel like everything is going to piece together in a really good way. All we really are waiting for at this point is the patch notes to see exactly what everything is going to be like numerically. But if everything looks good on paper, then you can expect a build guide out of me on this in the next few days. And honestly, I'm really looking forward to trying out a bleed build, and I'm excited that we have free built-in explosions to our build, which is honestly a massive deal when it comes to early game third build. If you have any questions on any of this, or if you'd like to discuss any of this further, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below, and I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions or discuss any of this with you further. And I also stream on Twitch every single day, so if you want to come by and ask me any of your questions there, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you live. Or if you simply just want to come and hang out with the other kitties and be a part of our community, I'd be more than happy to see you there as well. With all that said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you're just as excited for Amazon as I am, and I hope to see you all in the next video.